My name is George T. Sander. Go by the name of Tom. I was born in Quincy, Illinois, October the 19th, 1923. I was taking my mother for a drive, and we were up at, close to now Hamilton, Illinois, and had a car radio on, and heard that the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor. And I told Mom, I said, Don won't be home. He was one of the first ones drafted, and he was scheduled to get out in January, I think, and so he didn't get home. But he made it later on, and that's how he told Mom, he said, let him go. He said, don't let him become a rifle toter like me. So I joined the Air Corps back in those days. I stayed in Quincy. I thought I'd never leave there, but war came along, and I left there to join the Air Force, or Air Corps back in those days, in July of 1942. And then I went through pilot training, glider pilot training, and I graduated before my 19th birthday. Had a date, went to theater there in my hometown, and after the show, I'm walking down the street with my girlfriend, it turned out to be my wife later on, and running across some high school friends. And they said, have you heard about the glider program? I never heard of it. Well, it's going to be out at Stillwell Hall tomorrow night at such and such a time. So I went out there, and oh God, the room was full of people. There was an age limit of 18 to 35 to get in the glider program. And so they selected 10 people for the Air Corps. And we took our flight training right there at Quincy at the municipal airport before we were called to active duty. That's the only way I found out about the glider program. The friends asked me about it, and I wish to hell I'd never met him after I'd been in there. And then there was a long wait to get into cadets, and I was anxious. I wanted to go over there and tear things apart, but when I landed in Normandy, it didn't take long to get me out of that mood in a hurry. It was a new branch of service, fast promotion, more money than the cadets made, power training, because after we finished basic, we were promoted to staff sergeant, and our pay jumped from $75 a month to $144 a month. Now, nowadays that doesn't seem like much, but it was a lot of money back in those days. It was so new, I don't even think they had a combat glider designed yet. But the Germans had great success with the gliders in the Mediterranean, Crete. They took Crete with gliders, and gliders and airborne troops. So then our powers that be thought we had to have gliders too. We had airborne divisions, but nothing with gliders. So that's how the glider program was born. I graduated from Lubbock Army Airfield 31st of March of 43. And they sent us to Louisville, Kentucky, to Bowman Field. And they would take us out to Fort Knox, and they taught us every arm that they had, rifles, machine guns, every weapon in our arsenal got to use, up to a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun. And that was just constant training. I'm deadly with a pistol. Don't ever let me shoot at you with a pistol. But the way you got out of Bowman Field and this constant training, infantry training, there was a red house setting up on a hill, and we attacked that thing damn near every day and always captured it. But it got to be pretty old after about 3 or 4 months of that stuff. So the only way you get out of Bowman Field was to qualify with the 03 rifle, Springfield .03. I only weighed 130 pounds. I wasn't a big fellow then. And when you get into rapid fire with that .3, it would just beat you to death. And we'd go out to the rifle range. I don't know how many times I went out to try to qualify. And we'd buy all the Kotex that they had in the exchange and put padding around us. And so we wouldn't get beat up too badly, but we still flinch, or I would flinch when you pull that trigger, because that thing had a hell of a wallop to it. So a bunch of us couldn't hit a bull in the butt with a banjo with that rifle, because it had such a kick to it, you know. You flinch whenever you're going to shoot it. So we got together and decided the way to get out of there. Got this group together, and one group of us would go down in the pits, you know, and when the guy would fire, when they hear him fire, then you'd lower the target, and then you would put markers up there to show where the bullets went. Well, there wasn't too many holes in the one that I'd taken care of, so we put batches up there, you know, bullseye and all this stuff. Just take a pencil and punch a hole through it, see, and then you cover it up. And then it was my turn to go back and shoot, and they did the same thing for me. And that's how I got out of Bowman Field. Did Jim tell you that?
Yeah, he didn't tell me. He told me to ask about it.
Well, that's it. Yeah, statute of limitations have run out on it, so I don't care. They had brought in a pilot by the name of Murphy, Mike Murphy, a stunt pilot, and I guess he's the best best pilot the Air Force ever commissioned, because he was a barnstormer before the war, and he had a checkered biplane, and I saw him take off at Louisville, and as soon as he was up high enough, he'd roll that baby on its back, and he would fly the pattern upside down, and right before he'd come in for a landing, he'd flip it over and land. And he taught us how to fly those gliders. The training we got there was nothing standardized. You go to one school and it was 3-point landings. You go to another school, it was wheel landings. And any speed, when we got into the combat gliders, any speed you wanted to bring it in at was fine, as long as you maintained the constant airspeed. And you could bring that in thing at 100 mile an hour. Well, you're not going to find any fields over in a combat, you know, where you can come in at 100 mile an hour. So Murphy taught us how to fly. We flew those babies right above stalling speed. And we learned how to do that in Piper Cubs and Aeronicas and light aircraft. And you would fly those things right above stalling speed. And lots of times, I've landed already and I saw Goodyear on the tires that come up when the wheels, or when landing gear went off. Because you stall it in, and sometimes it stall out too high. But he taught us how to fly. That's the easiest flying plane going. The only thing that changed was your glide ratio. The heavier it was, the less glide you had when you cut off. I think it was Merrifield at Nottingham. That's where we landed when we got off the ship. I landed there in March of '44, and then. It was just practice, but they never permitted us to fly loaded gliders. They were all empty gliders. Well, there's a big glide ratio difference between a loaded glider and an empty one. And I think that contributed to a lot of the crashes in Normandy. That glider weighed 3,500 pounds, and you could carry 3,500 pounds of cargo, or you could carry 13 men, a pilot and a co-pilot, or a Jeep, and so many anti-tank guns, which I took into Holland, and ammunition. So it was, that was about it as far as, and it was amazing. That's how one of the airborne generals got killed, because his troops wanted to make certain that he was protected, and they loaded that glider down with armor plate. And Mike Murphy flew him in, and when, I don't know, he didn't notice it, I guess, that the plane was heavy, overloaded, until he went to land. And he crashed, and the general got killed, and he had both legs broken, I think. But it was just because they put so much armor plating underneath the floor where that general was sitting, so he wouldn't get hurt. He didn't get hurt, he got killed. And we got a very poor briefing going into Normandy. They told us those hedgerows were no more than the hedges we saw around England. Well, that was wrong. They had these big, tall trees, and why we didn't get a better briefing, I don't know, because surely they had French people, that lived in that area, that could have told them what the situation was. And I think they must have relied on aerial photographs, and they must have taken them at high noon because there wasn't any shadows, I guess, or something, and they just assumed that there was small trees. It was the dumbest briefing I ever got. I cut off tow at 9:15 in the morning on June the 7th. I didn't go on the 6th. Went in on the 7th. I came in. I was carrying a Jeep, 30 caliber water-cooled machine gun mounted on it, and 4 troopers and a lot of ammunition. Well, they cut us loose at approximately 500 feet. And there's some small arms fire that hit us, When I looked the glider over later, it had a few holes in it. When I went into Normandy, I flew that thing right above stalling speed. Otherwise, I'd never made it. If you come in, 90 mile an hour, you'd run into all those hedgerows, yeah. The field I had picked out, it's a good thing I didn't make it. But I was losing altitude so fast, I happened to look down and saw a field. I guess some of my prayers were answered. And I managed to get in there and popped a tail chute and slipped the thing and got it in there and didn't even break a tail wheel. Right outside of St. Mary Église. And we stayed there while I unloaded my glider with the help of the airborne infantry that I took in with me. There was a lieutenant and three enlisted men, and myself and my co-pilot. And we landed there and unloaded after things quieted down. And then most of the time we just stayed in the holes in the ground because there was a lot of shooting going on, and there was paratroopers hanging from trees and all kinds of stuff. People about as young as I was. We were all young when we went in there. I was 20 years old, and I never saw so many dead bodies in my life. And the glider that landed ahead of me, like 15 or 30 minutes ahead of me, they never even got their seat belts unbuckled. They were machine gunned right in their glider. And I landed alongside them, and of course somebody had taken care of the people that did it, the Germans. But if I made it that next field, that was still in German hands, and I'd have been like that other glider that was all shot up. The burial crew, or whatever they called them, was looking for everybody, and they've got everybody but the pilot. And I went over there, and I found the pilot under the wing. Now, how he got out of there, I don't know. But he was under this wing, and I knew him. I can't remember his name now because we'd gone through training together. And when I came back from overseas and got him, my wife was coming up to meet me in Chicago. We were waiting for the train to come in, and the fellow that was in charge of the gate, he happened to look up and see my wings. And he said, "Were you a glider pilot?" And I said, I said, yes. And he said, my son was one. He said his name was so-and-so, and it was a fellow I found under that wing. And I didn't have the heart to tell him that I found his son there. And I wish I could remember their name, but I can't. And they're probably all gone too now. I never wanted to go back in. I want to go through it again. That's like watching Private Ryan. I wouldn't go see that because I saw too much of it. Well, our squadron, I think, generally threw in about 13 or 14 gliders, and there was a group, so that'd be 4 times that. Our group probably threw in between 50 or 60 gliders. And I don't know how many gliders were actually dropped in Normandy. And we stayed there till nightfall. And then we had to get back to the beach by ourselves. And I spent more time in the ditches getting back to the beach because every time we'd get up on the road, there would be sniper fire or mortar fire thrown in on us. And we finally got back to the beach, and this buddy of mine said, this is the best place to be. I said, it is like hell. I said, this is the worst place. And about that time, her engine, we had 1 or 2 German aircraft in that area, and they would cut their engines and glide in and strafe. They made you stand in line to sign a book. And each time I would get up there to sign the book, this Jerry would come over and start strafing, and then all the ships would start firing, searchlights all over the place. And then I would run for cover. There was a seawall there. And this one time I jumped in a foxhole, and there was a body in there. A guy was dead. And I just pulled him over on top of me. I figured it might slow up some of them, if they hit us. But the next time after I got out of there, I went and run out to this, I think they called them ducks, D-U-K-Ws. And I ran out and jumped on that thing, and one of the Army types said, did you sign the book? I said, you damn right. I kept right on going. So I don't know what they were doing with that book anyway, but that was military. Military was never known for its a lot of brain power. But we had to get back to England as soon as possible because they were preparing for a drop on Caen. Because Montgomery was stalled there, and we were supposed to go in and help them out. And it's a good thing we didn't because the Germans had a Panzer division in there, and they called it off at the last minute. I'm very thankful for that because it had been just slaughter, really. Most of us made it back, but some of them were hospitalized. One crashed and skull fractured. But one of them, he got shot in the leg, and I thought he was going to make it because when I was debriefing, I told him that I think his name was Ryan. I said, Lieutenant Ryan will be back. I said, he was at the first aid station last time I saw him, and he had a bullet through the calf of his leg. And I said, we had a cigarette together. And he said, he won't be back. He died of before he got out of there. And I think they gave him the wrong blood type. And then when I got back home on leave or something, there was somebody needed blood, so I went to this hospital. And they were going to type my blood, and I said, you don't need to do that. I said, mine's type A. Well, I would type it anyway, and they typed it, and I'm class B+. So if same thing that happened to me if I'd have got a blood transfusion, probably. And this poor old guy, I mean, hell, there wasn't anything wrong. He had a bullet hole in his leg. It was painful, but nothing that would cause a fatality, cause him to die. And then in September, they came up with this drop into Holland, which they made a movie out of, A Bridge Too Far. And our mission was to hold these bridges. and we were only supposed to hold them for a day or two. We held them for 5 or 6, and the British never got through to us because I don't know what the deal was. I could criticize it, but hindsight is great, you know. We spent first night in Holland. We spent it in a Dutch farmhouse, and we were in the Catholic section of Holland, and this Dutch family asked us through their daughter, who could speak English, what our religion was, and there was about 4 or 5 of us that were Catholic. And they said, "Oh, good, you can go to church with us." So the next day or second day after, I don't know what, we went to church with Mama and Papa, and the priest got up and made a sermon and was bragging, or praising us, so to speak, you know, what we all did for him and all, in Dutch. We didn't know it, and this girl was telling us. And I guess they thought we were really brave types. And we came outside, and just got outside of a church, and there was a sniper. He fired, and it hit the side of the church not too far from us. And I dove behind Mother. And I don't think from that time that her estimation of me was as high, because I was just trying to get away from that sniper, but they took care of him. The airborne did. They were having a rough time at Arnhem, and we were right outside Arnhem, so to speak, of Eindhoven or somewhere like that. And we were told to get out, and that's one of the problems that I have to this day. As we were getting out, I was walking down this road, and a British tank that was coming up the road got hit by I guess an 88 or something. And these fellows tried to get out of that tank, and they were on fire. And I tried to debate whether I should have shot them, you know, to get them out of their misery or what, and I didn't. And I can still hear their screams and stuff like that from burning. When we were going back up towards the front, other glider pilots were coming back, and they said we were told to evacuate, get out of there, and we're all heading for Brussels. So we got to Brussels, and that was quite a town. And after about 3 or 4 days of making a lot of noise and raising a little hell, the commanding general for that area put out a warning that any glider pilots found in Brussels after such and such an hour will be arrested. So we caught trains or trolleys out to the airport, and then we got flown back to our squadron. But there was 3 fellows. Their name was, 2 of them's name was Pierce, and I can't remember the other guy's name. And they were standing on the street corner with me, and they said, "We're going to Paris. Come along, Tom." I said, or George. I said, "No." I said, "That's off limits." He said, "Yeah, but we want to get there." So they managed to get into Paris, where they got picked up because it was off limits to everybody, except I guess the brass or something like that. And here we're back at our base, I guess it was in England, yeah. And they brought these 3 fellows back, and they were shipping them back to the States on a bomb selling tour. They told them, the people, that the MPs who picked them up, that they were evaders and had been with the Dutch underground. Well, that was a policy. If you were with the underground, they had to get you out of there. So, you know, if you were ever captured, you wouldn't tell who they were or something. That's what I've been told. These guys got to come back to the States, of course. They were treated like lepers while they were in our squadron because they broke every rule in the book, and here they were coming out on the top end of the stick, so to speak. We got back to England, yeah, and then we moved over to France, and around Epernay, Reims and Epernay. And we used to get a bottle of champagne, the best champagne for a candy bar or a pack of cigarettes. Well, that cost a whole nickel because cigarettes were 50 cents a carton and candy bars were a nickel a piece or something. And and then when they would overrun a German depot, uh, we had a flight surgeon. He would jump on the C-47 and have them fly him up there wherever the depot was taken, and he would sign a release that he needed this alcohol for medicinal purpose for the troops. We had nothing but the best cognac and champagne and things like that a couple times. Brandy. And then we got moved up to a field called A43. And I don't know what town it was around anymore, but we used to go fishing with hand grenades. That's a good way to catch fish. And then you would get tired of that, or you won't eat so many fish, or so cooks got tired of fixing them or something. I don't know. And then they moved us up to I don't know what the number of the field was, but it was a Dreux, D-R-E-U-X, France. And it was a small town, but it had a big cathedral. Every French town that I saw had a cathedral in it. And we were 40 miles, or 40 kilometers, I think, from Paris. And whenever we get time off, man, we would head for the big city. But then when we went back to Epernay, the champagne and that was not a candy bar anymore. The Americans had ruined it for everybody, so you couldn't get by with a candy bar or a pack of cigarettes. We used to go out in the country and get eggs from them and, poultry products. And because, let's face it, the food we got in the mess hall was not very, very appetizing. We'd get turkey or chicken, and some of them were just rotten. Because I knew the cooks, and I used to give them some of my liquor supply, and me and my 3 tent mate buddies always got steaks whenever they came in. You got to play the game. The cooks in that were a lot older, or most of them were, and they all missed their liquor, and they didn't get the liquor ration that the officers did. And we got a liquor ration whenever it was available, and I'd always give them a jug of it, and they remembered and repaid in kind. So we did a lot of resupply work. Flying C-47s as a co-pilot. They wouldn't let us fly the left-hand seat. We always had to fly on the right-hand seat, but we wouldn't have had any trouble landing them or taking them off. We didn't use gliders for resupply so much as we did C-47s. They flew gliders into Bastogne, and which was a total loss. I think only one glider got through, and it had 2 chaplains in it. But I think everyone that went in there. So we didn't use gliders too much for resupply. We just used C-47s. I got more twin engine time than I have anything else, really. And that's why I wouldn't fly around here in these little puddle jumpers. If I haven't got 2 fans out there, I don't want any part of it. That was another easy plane to fly. It was very simple, and it's still flying today. They've got C4 or DC-3s, I think, was a commercial version, but they're still flying them today. I don't know if there's any here in the States, but I know they got them in South America. Douglas made a good plane there. When they made the breakout, when they started moving across, Patton did, when they started moving into Germany, we were supplying him with fuel. And we ended up in Tempelhof, in occupation troops. Yeah, we supplied Patton all the way through with gasoline, and any other troop carrier groups did also. And we were a flying bomb, really, with that much gasoline. And one time, one I think it was a Messerschmitt, broke through, and just two burst and had two of our planes shot down. Just bam! That was just balls of fire. That was the end of them. We had a rope stretched from the cabin door to the cockpit because you had an escape hatch above your head, but if you went out that way, you fell into the props. So we had this rope. I mean, what good that would do, I don't know, but we had it, and there was no smoking on board either. We'd put 150 jerry cans in the cabin of the C-47, and we had 800 gallon in the wings, and then we would fly up, and we were not certain that the field we were supposed to land in was in our hands. It was just farmer's field that they had made suitable for landing, and then that's the only time I ever saw officers work. But emptying those 150 jerry cans so we could get out of there, because every now and then they would throw mortars in on you. And there was a fellow from St. Louis. He comes from a beer family. I'm not going to tell you the name of it, but he was a navigator. And his first mission was flying up there with this gasoline. And he was out there unloading gasoline, and a mortar hit, and he got a piece of shrapnel across his hand. He got Purple Heart first mission. Oh, I didn't get to know him too well. He was, he went home or went to some other outfit pretty quickly. But that's probably something you can tell your beer drinking family or something, or beer making family. I hate to brag about how brilliant I am, but into Normandy, I took an M1 and a Colt 45. And you could only fire one shot at a time. I wish I had a Thompson machine gun. So when I went into Holland, I took a Thompson sub. And there you could see for miles, and those things only got a range of about 50 yards. So I wasn't too brilliant when it come to arm, but you were given your choice what you wanted to take in. And grenades and all that stuff. And I always carried some grenades strapped on my, I forget what they called it, musette bag straps. And one of the old airborne troops that briefed us on one of these missions come up to me. He said, "Son," he said, "if you got to use those things, you're too close. Get back." So that time on, I didn't have any grenades around, but we did use them for fishing. I was a flight officer, which is equivalent to a warrant officer junior grade. And then I got commissioned on Christmas Day of '44. I think it had to be, I think they classified it as a battlefield commission. But Eisenhower wanted more rank in the glider program. So I forget how many lieutenants they made, and the rest of them were all flight officers. And pay was the same, but other than that, why, there wasn't a hell of a lot of difference. But if you stayed around long enough, you can make first lieutenant after 18 months. I was in Paris. We knew it was coming, so they cut us loose. And everybody knew it, but it wasn't official. And I remember a Frenchman trading ties with me. I still got the tie somewhere, a polka dot bow tie, and it got pretty wild there. Oh God, it was fantastic. I didn't see any parades. I don't think I was in any condition to see much of anything. But those days are long gone. I settle now for a beer every other night or something. But last night I went up to Red Lobster and had 2 beers. So that's pretty heavy drinking for me right now. So that's one time the French showed their appreciation for us. And they showed it when we landed and when we were going through France. But I don't know what happened to our relations after that, because the French soured on us or vice versa. I don't know which. And good pilots and bad pilots. I think I flew with every pilot in our squadron, and I looked forward to flying with some of them, and I dreaded flying with others because some of them just didn't instill confidence in you, that's all. After the war, we were flying from Berlin. We were in occupation duty up there. And we were flying people down to, I think it's pronounced Cannes, on the Riviera. And we would fly these Army troops, I think most of them, down there for a rest leave. We were flying one day, had a young lieutenant fresh out of the States. And he had made friends with a flight nurse. And he asked her to come up and sit in my seat. And I said, no way in hell are you going to, am I getting out of my seat here for her? So he went and said, well, crew chief went and put the armrest together and so she could sit on that. And we flew over towards Toulon. That's where the French Navy was sunk, you know. And he wanted to show her the harbor of Toulon. He'd never been there himself anyway. But he got down so low, I looked out, and the prop tips were swirling water. That's how low he was. And I looked up, and there's a big cable going right across in front of us, and he was jabbering to this gal, and I took that wheel and pulled it back, and we went over top of that cable. And so then we landed at Cannes, and I said, that's the last time I'm flying with you. And we got back, I reported him, and I don't think he ever let him ride in the left seat again. But he could have killed a whole bunch of us, you know, and just trying to make an impression, and he made a firm one on me. So, did you ever get tired of going someplace that people would give their eye teeth to? Well, that's where I got about the Riviera. We had to fly down there so often and taking these troops down and then bringing a load back with us. And I got to the point where I didn't want to fly down there anymore. It was the same old thing. You had some of the best hotels, Ritz-Carlton and things like that, they put us in. But I just got tired of going down there. And that's the first time I saw women. Well, this was on my first rest leave when I came out of Holland. And we stayed at the Hotel Martinez. It was a pretty plush place. And I got up first morning and went out towards the beach. And here's all these French females. They had some parachute silk for bikinis and nothing on top. So I went in, got the squadron, and told all the people down there on rest leave, come on out of here. I don't think any of us had ever seen anything like that, but after that, it got to be old hat anyway. I remember having a close call one time. We were the last plane taken off from this field up in Germany, and the pilot was Rossi Needham. He was the skinniest guy in the group, and just one hell of a fine pilot. He was the skinniest guy in the squadron. And later on, I saw him in '61 at Omaha, and he was the biggest guy. I never saw him. But we were the last plane to take off. So I don't know how many planes had taken off ahead of us. And we must have gotten caught in their prop wash. Because we looked at the gauges, we was all over the area just fighting like hell to keep that thing in the air. And we looked at the gauges, looked like everything was running, and I looked out and the prop was still spinning. I told him my engine was running and his was too. And finally we got out of it. But it scared us, shook us up so badly. Let's not say scared, nobody ever gets scared in the military. But it got to us. And we were down there back to Paris when I said, Rossi, you think we ought to lift the gear? We left the gear down. So that's another one of the stories. I got out of there in October, and got on board. Well, I got home on November the 11th, but to backtrack a little, we were up in Berlin. And Berlin was good duty. I mean, they finally fixed us up some decent quarters there at Tempelhof. And I think the only building that wasn't hit in Berlin was the brewery, local brewery. And we had beer from the time we moved in there. And we had this beer in the club all the time, and schnapps, stuff like that. But anyway, we were listening to Armed Forces Radio. And here they're sending people home with 40, 45, 40 points. And I'm sitting up there with 111. And the rest of the squadron had comparable amounts, you know. Couldn't understand why we were not being sent home. So we had a plane that had to fly back to Paris, and while they were in Paris, they went to the Inspector General's office. And they went in and told him, said, how come you're sending people home with low number of points and we're sitting up there with over 100? Well, let me check. So it took him a while to check it, but he come back and he said, well, your commander has been sending in negative reports saying that no one wants to come home, that they like their duty so much. So that night, the clown came in the club and he almost got lynched. And his comment, well, he said, all I'm trying to do is make regular Army. Well, who in the hell cared whether you made regular Army or not back in those days? I wanted to get home. And I don't know whatever happened to him. I heard he'd been court-martialed, but I don't know, for falsifying reports. But then they sent us over to England, and where we had to wait because they had a dock strike in New York. And so we had to wait until the dock strike was over, and we got back there sometime 8th or 9th of November, and I got home on the 11th. So things didn't always run smooth. I stayed in for a year after I got back. And because my brother said, Tom, he said, if you can stay in longer, do it. He said, people are tired of veterans coming back. He said, there's nothing back here. He was working, excuse me, as an apprentice tinner. And so I had an opportunity to sign up. And then my wife decided, we had a little girl named Donna, and she determined that the Army Air Force was not a place to raise children. So we got out and went back to Quincy. And I think I got out in 47 or 48, and I got recalled for the Korean War. And then I went back after I think we were supposed, I don't know how long I stayed in that time because it was at the government's pleasure, so to speak. And when I could get out, I went back to see about my old job. And they said, you can have the same thing you had when you left. I said, you're going to start me out at $200 or $250 a month? I said, I'm making far more than that. Take it or leave it. I said, shove it. So I went back. I stayed in the military then. And haven't regretted it. It's the best decision I ever made to make a career of it. And I was figured my grains of sand had just about run out. And when I got back, I flew until I got out the first time. And then when I went back in as administrative officer. And then after that, I got into radar work. And that was my main job from then on, was radar. I was in Korea, yeah. And I just saw on the news last night, this colonel and his family were there. And wishing everybody a Merry Christmas. And when I was there, you didn't even want to be there, much less bring a family over, because Seoul was the pits. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the they had open sewers. So I mean, if that's what you want to call them, all they were ditches. And but now I guess they got housing and everything else for them over there. But when I was there, it was nothing. We slept in, had tents. Most of it was classified. And so, but I was on the mainland for about 6 months, and then they sent me out to an island called P.Y. Do, Pangyang Do, and they had a radar site out there, and we were 3.5 miles from communist-held island, and we had a Korean Marine regiment that took care of the island for security purposes. And that Marine colonel, or Korean colonel we got along fine. But I didn't like the way they treated their subordinates. If we did that, they'd throw us in Leavenworth. One thing about Korea, there wasn't anything to do except your work. And we'd go hunting ducks. They would take off in the morning from these rice paddies, and then they would fly out and set offshore all day long, and then at dusk they would come in and land in the rice paddies to eat again. And what we would do is get on the four sides of this rice paddy and get them against the skyline, you know, and shoot ducks. And then we would take them back, and the Korean cooks would clean them, fix them up for us, and we had duck all the time. I was assigned to Olathe Naval Air Station, which had an Air Force radar site on it, and I stayed there for 5 years. And that's when I got my assignment to Bermuda. And I'd go back in the service tomorrow if they'd send me back to Bermuda. They had a beautiful golf course, and spent lots of time out there because didn't have a lot to do. The mission of that base at one time was for aircraft flying from the States to Europe. Well, in case they had difficulty, there was this island out there in the ocean that they could come in and land. And then they started getting air-to-air refueling, and they all bypassed us. We had very little traffic, so the only thing to do was play golf or fish.
But real fishing this time, right?
Oh God, yeah. You fish with a 100-pound test line. You go up these coral reefs, you know, and God only knew what you were going to bring up. Anything from rockfish, red snappers or something, octopus, sharks, you name it. I'd bring in a fish one time, and a shark come right by, and all left on my hook was the head. He just whoosh, and that was it. I ran the APO over there, and then that was about the extent of my duties. And we'd get 2 planes in a day, and it didn't take very long, you know, for the boys to pick up the mail and put it up. And then once a month we got a boat that would come in with, you know, third-class stuff, packages and things. But that's all we really had to do. And well, I guess they had a air-sea rescue out there, and they had a Navy outfit that would come in every now and then on detached duty. They didn't want to take over the responsibility and maintenance of that island, but they would send their troops out, these P-3 Orions, I think they were, on submarine patrols for a month at a time. Then they would rotate them and send out another group. And that way they didn't have to pick up the expenses for maintaining that. And after, I don't know when the Air Force finally dumped that thing on the Navy. But They were the ones that had all the gravy, and the Air Force had the expense. I stayed for 30, but they said, you just got back from Korea, I mean from Bermuda a year ago, so we're going to send you to Vietnam. And I said, wait a minute. I said, I've got 26 years in. And I said, my retirement papers will be in Monday morning. And I got out. That was in 68. I was a major. They said, well, you'll never put on your colonel's leaves unless you go to Vietnam. And I said, you know what you can do with that was it. Yeah, I didn't want any part of it anymore. That's all I wanted. After I got back in, she enjoyed it. Liked it very much. Made a lot of good friends. And she, this time she had no apprehension or anything about. In fact, it was the best education the kids ever had. They still correspond with some of their classmates from, especially Bermuda. And they, when Leanne, I think that's the one that, she was a college professor up here at CU, and then she still corresponds with a couple of them that we was in school with. But Leanne came down with MS, and she's in a wheelchair, and she can't teach anymore. But it's a shame. But you see other people, why it's just as bad, I guess. Mike, I had 3 children. Donna, who's the oldest, she lives in Flagstaff, Arizona. She retired from the Bank of America after her husband retired from the Army and Air Force Exchange Service, and they had to get out of Texas. That heat down there was unbearable. And the lake that they lived on, they had a nice home on this lake, and it was so hot, no moisture for about 3 years. The lake, there wasn't any water in it. It had receded so far. And then Roger retired from AFIS, and that's when they came up here while they were having their house built down in Flagstaff. Now Mike, he lives in Austin. He's got two sons, 2 of the finest kids you'd want to meet, and they're both computer whizzes, you know. I think they're both employed by IBM, and he's on his, well, he had 2 marriages. Dad, I'm giving it up. Can't get it right, so he hadn't gotten married. But he had to raise those boys by himself. I mean, his first wife said, I'm tired of playing house, and got up and left him with 2 boys. And then Leanne, she was in Waco. I was stationed at Waco right before I got out of the service. And she was going to Baylor University. And then when I got out of the service, Mary Ellen, my wife, and I had bought a trailer, and we traveled all over 48 states, Canada, and Mexico, trying to find a place to settle. And never been in Colorado to speak of, and when we come over the hill there in Boulder, Mary Ellen said, this is the place. So we settled there. And then Leanne, she wanted to come home with Mom and Dad because her roommate was getting married. So she come up here and finished her master's and doctorate, and then she was teaching up here. And when she got MS. So that's my family since 1970, 31 years, yeah. Been in this house 26. You know, when we got here, there was no electric lights of any type, you know, to control traffic. Well, there wasn't any traffic to speak of. And now you can't get across the street sometimes. Yeah, it's bad. So I wish it was like it was, but every place is like this. And I wouldn't trade this area for any place in the world, really. I work for Hughes, and for 8 years. They all knew I was a glider pilot, and they used to kid me about how could anyone be so dumb as to fly a plane without engines and things like that, you know. And then I had my heart problems, and I just didn't want to get involved in anything. In fact, had everything set up, you know, make certain Mary Ellen was taken care of, because the only time she was in the hospital is when she had children. And she had a stroke, and bam, that was it. And that was 3 years ago. So I went to one in Omaha, I think it was 61. Then they had one here in Denver, uh, down south off I-25. Can't remember what year that was, but we had. I kept up contact. Well, I still email back and forth with a fella down in Hot Springs, Arkansas. He was in my tent, Doug Maltby, and I could tell you a story about him, and I'm going to tell you when the tape is run. My best friend, he just passed away recently back in Virginia, and I never got back to see him. He was always asking me to come out, and never made it, but he was my closest friend. Weber W. Joe Shows was his name. And he and I went through training. We stayed in the same barracks at Bowman Field. They gave us a barracks to stay in, even though I lived off base because I'd gotten married a month before I graduated. But we went through all of our training together, and we went back to join the 441st Group at Sedalia, Missouri. And Joe was assigned to another squadron, and he had a little deal with the adjutant there, where it was blackmail is what it was. But he would get more 3-day passes than you could shake a stick at. And the 4th 39th Group was going overseas ahead of us, and they were short glider pilots. So this adjutant managed to get him shipped out, boy, in less than an hour's notice. He was out of there. And next time I saw him, we corresponded back and forth in England because they were in a different place. But next time I saw him was in Normandy, and he was trying on clothes, taking them off of dead people, corpse, and trying them on, because he landed in what he thought was a field, and it was a swamp. It had looked like it was a green field, and he landed in it, and he was soaking wet. And I don't know, this was a couple hours after we landed. I guess he had a heck of a time getting out of there. And then that's what he was doing. He was trying on everything. And then he married a girl from, over there. I knows well I know my own name. And they had one child after he got married back in the States. And Joe was from Mississippi. And he wasn't a very good scholar in high school, but this wife of his made him study and took him back to, how in the hell can you forget a place like that? Wales. She was from Wales. She took him back there, and when he came back, he had a master's degree in, I don't know, geology or something. And old Glenda really shaped him up, but he and Glenda didn't get along, so they ended up divorced. And then his second wife, I never met her. I just talked to her on the phone. He told me he had prostate cancer, but it was under control. And boy, all of a sudden it took off, and that was the end of him. So, and that's too far to go back for the funeral, Virginia. But he was a very good friend of mine. In fact, he spent more time at home than I did after we got assigned to Sedalia Army Air Base in Missouri, because he'd get these 3-day passes, and he'd go back instead of going to his home in Mississippi, he'd go over to Quincy, stay with my mom and dad. Yeah, he was quite a boy. I was upset, like all of us were. Uh, I think I was more uh, concerned on December the 7th because I knew it was going to affect me eventually. And I knew we were going to be in war, and I had a brother in there. But here, the way they fight wars now, uh, it's a lot different, and civilians are involved in this thing, and that's the thing that they're not taking this thing serious enough, I don't think. And I think it's a lot of politics involved in all this. And that's why I mentioned before that politicians don't impress me. One is just like the other. Tell people what they want to hear, and blow a little blue smoke at them, and they'll buy it. I'm a registered independent, but everyone I ever voted for didn't turn out too well. Joe wanted to know whether I wanted to go see if I was going to see Saving Private Ryan. I said I had enough of that. I don't want to see it again. So I never went, but he did. And I had nightmares after they didn't bother me at first, but when I got retired and came to Broomfield, I started having nightmares, flashbacks, and my wife, she'd have to wake me, and of course I'd disturb her sleep. And I said, "Well, I'll move up in the front bedroom." No, don't do that. You stay in here. Well, finally I convinced her because they were coming quite frequently, and I didn't recall them, but she'd have to wake me up because I was trying to run and holler and help. But that's about the extent of it, yeah. We never got into detail. I've talked more about the war now than I have since I got out, I guess. I guess it's because I'm getting old and want to get it out. I don't know. There are not too many left anymore. And the records, I've got a book with the people who are members of glider pilots in World War II. I got a book with everybody's name. We get it once a year, and each year that list of deceased is getting longer and longer.